Betrayal feel like a slow death. Standing there, frozen in the doorway of my own bedroom, watching my young wife tangled in the arms of my son. My own flesh and blood. I felt something inside me shatter. It wasn't just pain. It was humiliation. It was rage. It was regret. I wasn't one of those men desperate to prove something, chasing after a woman half my age to feel young again. But life has a way of making fools out of us all. I had given Isabel everything. My name, my wealth, my devotion. And Nathan, my son, the boy I raised, the man I welcomed back into my home when he had nowhere else to go. He had done this to me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear the whole house apart. But all I could do was stare, my heart pounding in my ears, as my wife and my son scrambled to cover their naked betrayal. Before I continue, I just want to take a moment to thank my subscribers and gifters for their support. You all keep me going, and I appreciate you more than words can say. Now, let me share my story, the one that nearly destroyed me. My name is James Carter, and I am a man who has lived long enough to know that wealth doesn't buy happiness. I built my fortune from the ground up, worked harder than most, and provided a life of comfort that many only dream of. But at 58 years old, I found myself learning a lesson I never expected. Money couldn't stop betrayal. I married Isabel when she was 24. She was stunning, long blonde hair, piercing blue eyes, and a laugh that could make any man weak. I never wanted to marry a woman that young. I knew better. I knew that love between a 50-year-old man and a 20-something woman wasn't always real love. But she made me feel young again, and against my better judgment, I gave in. Then there was Nathan, my 28-year-old son from my first marriage. He was reckless, carefree, never held down a job for long. I had bailed him out of trouble more times than I could count. And yet, despite everything, I loved him. Maybe that's why I made the mistake of letting him back into my home. It started a year ago when Nathan lost his apartment. He had burned through his savings, as he always did, and came to me, desperate. I had told myself I was done cleaning up his messes, but when he stood on my doorstep with his hands in his pockets, looking like a lost little boy, I couldn't turn him away. I let him move into the guest house on my property, just a short walk from the main house where Isabel and I lived. First, everything seemed fine. He was grateful, promised to get his life together. Isabel was supportive, saying it was the right thing to do. But looking back, I realize now it started then. The small, insignificant moments that I ignored. The way Isabel laughed too much at Nathan's jokes. The way Nathan always seemed to be around when Isabel was home alone. The way they exchanged quick glances when they thought I wasn't looking. I told myself I was being paranoid. She's my wife. He's my son. What kind of sick thoughts was I having? But the signs were there. I just didn't want to see them. One night, about 6 months after Nathan moved in, I came home late from work. Isabel was in the kitchen, sipping a glass of wine, and Nathan was leaning against the counter beside her. Too close. They were laughing about something, some inside joke I wasn't a part of. When I walked in, the laughter died instantly. Isabel smiled at me, but there was something in her eyes, something I couldn't name. Nathan gave me a casual, "Hey, Dad," and walked off, disappearing into the guest house. I should have asked her then. I should have asked why she looked at him like that. But I didn't. I just kissed her cheek, poured myself a drink, and ignored the tightness in my chest. Because deep down, I didn't want to believe what I was starting to feel. One evening, I was having dinner with an old friend, Richard, a man who had been married and divorced 3 times. He never held back his opinions. "You married a girl in her 20s, James?" he said, swirling the whiskey in his glass. "No matter how much money you have, you can't stop biology." I laughed it off. "Isabel loves me. She's not like that." He sighed. "I hope you're right. But if I were you, I'd keep an eye on your son. He's young, he's got charm. And she's at an age where excitement matters more than stability." His words stayed with me that night. They lingered in my mind as I watched Isabel sleeping peacefully beside me. For the first time since we married, I felt uneasy. I started noticing things more after that. The way Isabel dressed up on days Nathan was around. The way Nathan talked about Isabel like she wasn't just his stepmother. but something more. One day, I came home early and found them on the couch, talking in hushed voices. When they noticed me, Isabel jumped up too quickly, her face flushing red. "What were you two talking about?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. Nathan grinned, unfazed. "Just life, Dad. Nothing serious." Isabel avoided my eyes, and that was when I knew. Something was happening between them. I didn't have proof yet, but my gut, the same gut that built my empire, that made me millions, was screaming at me that I was being played for a fool. But I ignored it, because to believe it would mean my world wasn't real anymore. And I wasn't ready for that. Suspicion is like a slow poison. It creeps in, settles deep, and eats away at everything you thought was real. I started seeing things I had ignored before, only now they were impossible to overlook. Isabel had always been affectionate, but something about her touches changed. They became distant, forced, like she was trying to convince herself she still wanted me. And Nathan? He had this newfound confidence around the house, as if he belonged more than I did. I didn't say anything. Not yet. I wasn't the type of man to make accusations without proof. But every laugh, every lingering glance, every time Isabel's eyes darted away when I looked at her too long, it all chipped away at my peace. One evening, I found them in the kitchen. Isabel was cooking, Nathan sitting on the counter beside her, drinking a beer. She was laughing at something he said, her hand lightly brushing his arm. When I stepped into the room, the air shifted. Isabel straightened, her smile fading. Nathan, on the other hand, barely reacted. "Something funny?" I asked, forcing a smile. "Just talking about old TV shows," Nathan said, his tone lazy, unbothered. Isabel cleared her throat. "You were late, so I made dinner." That wasn't unusual. But the way she wouldn't look me in the eyes, that was. The signs became more obvious after that. Late-night conversations in hushed voices. Sudden silence when I walked into a room. One night, I got up around 2 a.m. to get a glass of water. As I walked down the hallway, I noticed the glow of light seeping from under the living room door. I pushed it open quietly. There they were, Isabel and Nathan, sitting too close on the couch, whispering. They didn't see me at first. Isabel's hand was resting on Nathan's knee. His fingers toyed with the edge of her sleeve. They were too lost in whatever moment they were sharing to notice me standing there. When I cleared my throat, Isabel jerked away so fast, she nearly fell off the couch. "Dad?" Nathan said, stretching lazily, as if I hadn't just caught him doing something he shouldn't. "Can't sleep." I didn't take my eyes off Isabel. She looked guilty. "Neither can you, apparently," I said, voice calm but sharp. "Just talking," Nathan replied. He didn't look guilty. Not even a little. Isabel stood quickly. "I was just going to bed." She brushed past me without another word. Nathan lingered, watching me. There was something in his expression. A challenge. I wanted to believe I was imagining things. That I was an aging man letting jealousy cloud my judgment. But in that moment, I felt it in my gut. Something was wrong. Denial is a dangerous thing. I didn't want to believe my wife and son were betraying me. I convinced myself it was nothing. But doubt kept me up at night. So I tested her. One morning, as we sat at breakfast, I said casually, "I think Nathan should move out soon. He's been here long enough." I watched Isabel carefully. She froze for a fraction of a second before forcing a smile. "Really? I thought you didn't mind having him around." "I don't," I lied. "But he needs to stand on his own 2 feet." Isabel's fingers tightened around her coffee cup. That was the moment I knew. She didn't want him to leave. And that realization sent a sharp, cold fear through my chest. A week later, I made an excuse to leave for a business trip, but I never actually left town. Instead, I stayed at a hotel downtown, waiting, watching, testing a theory I prayed wasn't true. I came home unannounced on a Wednesday afternoon. The house was quiet, too quiet. Then I heard it, laughter, from the bedroom, our bedroom. I didn't want to open that door, but I had to. What I saw destroyed me, a door I should have never opened. Some moments in life brand themselves into your soul, forever burning, never fading. This was mine. I stood outside my own bedroom door, my heart hammering against my ribs. I could hear them, muffled laughter, whispered words, the sound of fabric shifting against fabric. I should have walked away. I should have spared myself the sight that would haunt me for the rest of my days. But I didn't. With a steadying breath, I gripped the doorknob and pushed the door open. And there they were, Nathan, my son, Isabel, my wife, tangled in each other, their bare skin glowing in the afternoon light spilling through the windows. The sheets, the ones Isabel and I had shared, the ones I had bought for our bed, were twisted around their
Can you hear
bodies.
me?
For a moment, time froze. Then
Hello?
chaos. Isabel let out a strangled gasp, scrambling to cover herself, eyes wide with terror. Nathan? He didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. He just sat up slowly, meeting my gaze with a look I couldn't place. Defiance? Indifference? Pity? Couldn't breathe. This wasn't real. Couldn't be. James? Isabel's voice cracked as she reached for me. It's not what it looks like. Not what it looks like. My chest heaved. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. Nathan, still shirtless, finally spoke. Dad, you should have knocked. That was it. That was all he said. Not an apology. Not an ounce of regret. Just a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth, as if this was some kind of joke to him. Rage boiled inside me, hotter than anything I had ever felt before. My son. My own blood. The boy I had raised, the man I had given chance after chance. He had done this. And Isabel, the woman I had given everything to, she had chosen him over me. I don't remember much of what happened in the next few minutes. I remember Isabel crying, pulling the sheets around her, begging me to listen, to understand. I remember Nathan stretching, as if this was nothing more than another lazy afternoon for him. And I remember the way my hands shook as I took a slow step back, the walls of my home closing in around me. This wasn't just an affair. This wasn't just betrayal. This was my own son taking my wife. I had been a fool, a blind, pathetic fool. I had let this happen. I had invited him into my home. I had ignored the signs. I had convinced myself that Isabel, my young, beautiful wife, who had never truly belonged to me in the first place, was different. I had thought love and money could keep her. I was wrong. The aftermath. I don't remember leaving the house. 1 second, I was standing in that doorway, suffocating in betrayal, and the next, I was outside, gulping in the cold evening air like a drowning man breaking the surface. I drove without knowing where I was going. My hands were numb on the wheel, my mind replaying the scene over and over like some cruel movie I couldn't turn off. Nathan's smirk, Isabel's tears, the way they had fit together so naturally, as if this hadn't been the first time. How long had this been going on? Had they laughed about me behind my back? Had they kissed in my kitchen, in my living room, while I sat there, blind and clueless? Had they ever stopped to think about what this would do to me? Or had they simply not cared? An empty house. Hours passed before I returned. The house was dark, quiet. For a moment I thought maybe they were gone. Maybe they had packed their things and left. But as I stepped inside, the silence felt wrong. I walked upstairs, my footsteps heavy. The bedroom door was still open. The sheets were gone. The bed was stripped bare, as if removing the evidence would erase what had happened there. I turned toward Nathan's guest house, my pulse hammering in my ears. The door was ajar. I pushed it open. Empty. His things were gone. His clothes, his bags, even the stupid guitar he never played but always carried around like it made him interesting. He had left. And Isabel? I found her downstairs, sitting at the kitchen table, her face buried in her hands. She didn't look up when I entered. I stared at her, at the woman I had once believed was my future, the woman I had worked so hard to make happy. Where is he? My voice came out rough, raw. She lifted her head slowly, eyes red, lips trembling. I don't know. I didn't believe her, but I didn't care anymore. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then, finally, I said the only thing left to say. I want you out. She flinched as if I had struck her. James, please. Out. My voice was ice. Tonight, I don't care where you go. I don't care what you do. But you will not spend another night under my roof. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I never meant to hurt you. I let out a bitter laugh. But you did. Her lips parted, as if she wanted to say more. Maybe she wanted to beg. Maybe she wanted to explain. But I didn't want to hear it. I turned and walked away, leaving her there, sobbing in the dark. This marriage, this illusion was over. And all I had left was the unbearable weight of betrayal. Ugly truth. A house that no longer felt like home. The next morning, the house was silent. Too silent. Isabel was gone. For good this time. Her clothes, her jewelry, the expensive handbags I had bought her, all vanished. Just like that, she erased herself from my life. I sat in the living room, staring at the wedding photo still hanging on the wall. Isabel in her white dress, smiling like she had won the lottery. Me in my tailored suit, standing proud, believing I had found love. What a joke. The only sound in the house was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Tick, 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 as if counting down the moments until I completely lost my mind. But I wasn't done. Not yet. Nathan had slithered away in the night, but he couldn't run forever. I needed answers. I needed to face him. And whether he liked it or not, I was going to get the truth. Finding Nathan wasn't hard. He was predictable, always had been. He was the kind of man who never faced consequences, who ran when things got messy, but never far enough. I checked his usual hiding spots. His favorite bar? No sign of him. His gym? Nothing. But then I remembered something. There was one place he always went when he needed to lay low. A cheap motel on the outskirts of town. I drove there without thinking, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. When I pulled into the parking lot, I saw his car immediately. He was here. I stepped out, heart pounding, and marched toward room 106. No hesitation. No second thoughts. I pounded on the door. Silence. Then, footsteps. A second later, the door cracked open. And there he was, Nathan, my son, looking at me like he had been expecting this. Face to face with the betrayer. Nathan leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, completely unfazed. "Dad," he said coolly, as if nothing had happened. The sight of him made my blood boil. The same cocky smirk. The same lazy arrogance. The same entitlement. I wanted to hit him. God, I wanted to hit him. But I wasn't here to fight. I was here for the truth. "You disgust me," I said, my voice low, dangerous. Nathan sighed. "Yeah, I figured you'd say that. How long?" I asked through clenched teeth. He raised an eyebrow. "How long what? How long have you been sleeping with my wife?" Nathan studied me for a moment. Then he smiled. "A few months," he admitted, shrugging like it was nothing. "But let's be honest, Dad. You saw it coming, didn't you?" Something in me snapped. I lunged forward, grabbing him by the collar, slamming him against the doorframe. His smirk didn't fade. "Do you even feel guilty?" I hissed. Nathan let out a breathless chuckle. "Why should I?" I gritted my teeth. "Because I raised you, you ungrateful little." "Raised me?" He scoffed. "You mean the same way you threw money at me and hoped I'd turn into someone respectable? The way you ignored me for years while you built your empire?" I froze. Nathan's smirk widened. "Face it, Dad. You didn't care about me. You cared about control. And when you married Isabel, you thought you could control her too." I shoved him back, disgusted. "You're pathetic." Nathan dusted off his shirt, unfazed. "And you're a fool. Isabel was never yours. She just wanted what you could give her." I shook my head. "So that's what this was? Revenge? A way to get back at me for being a bad father?" He chuckled. "No, Dad. It wasn't about you." Then he said something that nearly made me collapse right there in that dingy motel hallway. "She chose me. That's bitter truth." Those words hit me harder than a fist ever could. She chose him. She preferred my son over me. I had feared it, suspected it. But hearing it from Nathan's own mouth made it real. "You're lying," I muttered. Nathan shrugged. Believe what you want. But she's not coming back to you. You were just a stepping stone. She would have done it to someone else. I clenched my jaw, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing how deep his words cut. Nathan sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Look, Dad, I didn't plan for this to happen. It just did. I stared at him, my own son who carried my blood but felt like a stranger. You're not my son anymore, I said, my voice hollow. Nathan didn't even flinch. Yeah, I figured you'd say that too. I turned to leave, but before I walked away, I gave him one last look. Someday she'll betray you too, I said. And when she does, you'll understand exactly what you've done to me. For the first time, Nathan's smirk faltered. But I didn't stick around to see if my words sank in. I walked away, leaving him and every last shred of fatherly love I had left behind. A man without a family. I drove for hours, the weight of the betrayal crushing me. I had lost everything. My wife, my son, my dignity. I parked by the waterfront, staring out at the waves. The wind was cold, sharp, but I barely felt it. What now? Who was I if not a husband? If not a father? Who was I now that the two people I loved most had ripped me apart? I didn't have the answer. All I knew was this. I would never be the same man again. Days turned into weeks. Weeks blurred into months. The house felt like a tomb, silent, empty, cold. No matter how many bottles I emptied, one truth remained. I had brought this on myself. Looking back, seeing the signs. I sat in my study one night, staring at the same leather-bound journals where I had once tracked my investments. Only now I was tracking something else. My failures. I had been blind. From the beginning, I had ignored the warning signs. I had known Isabel was too young for me. I had felt the weight of our age gap, the whispers of doubt that gnawed at the edges of my mind. But I ignored them. I let her beauty blind me. Let her charm convince me that love could be bought, that devotion could be secured with a diamond ring and a bottomless bank account. And Nathan? I had always known he was reckless, selfish. But I never thought he would betray me. Maybe because, deep down, I never truly knew him. I was too busy building my empire to build a relationship with my son. Too focused on my own success to see the damage I had left behind. And in the end, he took the one thing I loved the most. Or maybe she had never been mine to begin with. One evening, I got a call. It was from her. For a moment, I just stared at the phone, my heart hammering in my chest. Then I answered. Hello, Richard. Isabel's voice came through, soft, hesitant. I said nothing. She sighed. I wanted to say that I'm sorry. Sorry? I echoed, my voice cold. For what, Isabel? Marrying me? Or screwing my son? She hesitated. I didn't mean for it to happen this way. But it did. Silence stretched between us. Then she spoke again. Nathan and I were not together anymore. I felt a bitter chuckle rise in my throat. Let me guess. He got bored. She didn't answer. I shook my head. I warned him. I told him you would betray him, too. Richard, I never wanted to hurt you, she whispered. I closed my eyes. Then why did you? She didn't have an answer. Because there wasn't one. Because she had never loved me. Because I had been a fool. I exhaled. Don't call me again, Isabel. And then, before she could say another word, I hung up. Starting over. I sold the house. I couldn't live there anymore. Not in the place where it all fell apart. I got rid of every reminder of Isabel. Every dress, every photograph, every piece of jewelry. I even threw away the wedding ring. And for the first time in my life, I started over. Not as a husband. Not as a father. Just as a man. I moved into a smaller home by the coast. Somewhere quiet, somewhere far from the memories. I stopped drinking. I focused on my work, but not to escape. This time, I built something for myself. And slowly, painfully, I learned to live again. Betrayal changes a man. It breaks him, shatters him, turns him into something unrecognizable. But in the wreckage, in the ruins, there is a choice. Stay broken. Or rebuild. I chose to rebuild. I would never love the same way again. I would never trust as blindly as before. But I would live. And in the end, that was enough.